Elden Ring and its ever-deepening lore, mechanics, and expansive world is pretty assuredly dominating the lives of a lot of gamers right now. Whether you're a FromSoftware devotee who's played every Soulsborne game end-to-end, or a newbie to the studio's brutal offerings, it's undeniable how rich each title is. 2022 RPG Elden Ring is absolutely no exception. It's packed to the brim with granular combat considerations, dense RPG mechanics, and lore tidbits that are extremely important to the overall narrative. For this list, though, we're putting the spotlight on the mechanics, story elements, and features that Elden Ring could definitely have done without. But the fact that FromSoftware decided to include them anyway is exactly what we love about them. Just how pointless you find each of these entries will depend on what you like out of your RPGs, but it's worth mentioning that each one is still cool in its own unique way regardless. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 9 pointless details in Elden Ring that'll blow your mind. Number 9. Accurate instrument playing for merchant songs. One of the few characters in Elden Ring who is not actively trying to kill you are the merchants. And while his haunting song played upon his string instrument is stunning in and of itself, there's a little more going on here. Attentive players discovered that the NPC's hand movements line up perfectly with the melody being played. A violin player weighed in to confirm that the shifting and vibrato animations are impressively replicated. Why FromSoftware would go to the effort of implementing this when it is arguably a pointless detail is anybody's guess, but I think we can all agree we love they decided to do it anyway. Number 8. It won't let you fall. That title probably has you feeling a little suspicious, since I'm sure if you're playing Elden Ring, you've fallen off many things many times to many deaths. While that's true, there is one circumstance where the game won't let you fall to your death. While traditionally attacking with your weapon, you've probably noticed that your character tends to step forward to execute a swing. In noticing that animation, you'd be forgiven for being pretty hesitant about attacking anything close to a ledge. Funnily enough, though, despite the game's apparent delight in killing you off 100 ways from Sunday, it won't let you tumble off a cliff to your death just for attacking too close to a ledge. You'll still be able to jump off intentionally or unintentionally, but a much appreciated invisible wall will pop up if you're just trying to hack at something hanging out near an edge. That said, if you aren't at an edge where the drop would be fatal, you can and will still fall to the landing below. This probably isn't a tip you want or need in your arsenal, since it just is the way the game is programmed, so it's kinda pointless, but definitely cool nonetheless. Number 7. STARSCOURGE RADHAN'S powers and his steed LEONARD. General Radahn, now STARSCOURGE, is a very large boss who rides a very tiny horse. Well, the horse is probably regular size, but given that Radahn is enormous, it begs the question of how he manages to stay atop his comparatively little steed. Of course, the studio could have gotten away with just making this another incredible grand enemy design without a lot of explanation as to what is exactly happening and getting into the whys and hows, but we know FromSoftware and we know they love the whys and hows. If you're a read every item description type, you might already be across this one, but it's the description for the remembrance of the STARSCOURGE consumable that sheds a little more light on the matter. It reads, the Red Lion General wielded gravitational powers which he learned in Celia during his younger days. Also, he would never have to abandon his beloved but scrawny steed. The Red Lion, of course, being Radahn, and his beloved scrawny steed is LEONARD. If you're wondering how we know the horse's name, that's because one clever player dug through the NPC AI scripts for the reference names and uncovered one for Radahn that read Radahn and LEONARD. In essence, this formidable boss is using gravity magic so he doesn't squash his tiny little steed underneath him, so hopefully he's not too uncomfortable under there. Number 6. The backstory of the crappiest summon. If you've spent any time at all battling in the harsh and unforgiving world of Elden Ring, you've probably come to appreciate the usefulness of summons. That said, much like all the gear you'll come across, not all summons are made equal. There's one such example which might have you giving up on the idea of summons altogether, but there's a pretty good reason as to why. The Noble Sorcerer is one of the spirit ashes you can come across and call upon when needed, but this guy really isn't much use. Despite the promising name, summoning this guy immediately feels like a waste of time because he'll basically rock up, stand around, maybe fire off a spell, and get killed. The item description for it reads, Spirit of a nobleman who once asked to be given a place at Raya Lucaria to learn glintstone sorceries. His talents were insufficient to be worthy of donning the stone crown, however, and he's only capable of using the most rudimentary sorcery. So essentially this dude failed at learning magic, and now you can summon him to watch him continue to be bad at it in the ghostly flesh. The lore is easily missable and pointless, but it's a cute, humorous addition that's a fun inclusion for attentive players. Number 5. A slight adjustment for certain armor types. There are a substantial amount of untraditional armor sets and pieces in Elden Ring, plenty with designs that, while admittedly impractical, do look super freaking cool. One example is the twinned armor, which features a silver bust encrusted into the breastplate. It depicts two entwined twins of gold and silver respectively, and it looks awesome and incredibly cumbersome. Interestingly, this clearly occurred to FromSoftware as they adjusted the character model to account for the armor. You'll notice that when the armor is equipped, your character holds their weapon higher than normal to account for the protrusion. It's a welcome detail, but not one that would have upset players were they to not address it, particularly since the same can't be said for the multiple armor sets that do clip into one another. I'm looking at you, permanently skewered pumpkinhead. Number 4. Footprints in the sand. As mentioned, you have loads of different options when it comes to what gear you want to equip and how each piece complements your chosen playstyle. While the intricacies of these choices aren't pointless at all, what could be considered pointless is what happens when you wander across the sand. This one was uncovered by Soulsborne super sleuth and Twitch streamer Lance McDonald, and while it may be very minute, it's pretty damn charming. Basically, if you walk across a sandy beach with shoes on, you'll leave shoe prints, but if you take your shoes off, you'll leave little footprints, complete with those little dots for your toes. It's a lovely little detail that, much like the rest of the entries on this list, showcases the developer's attention to detail, even down to the most mundane aspects. Number 3. The overworld is always rendered. This one is pointless because it doesn't actually affect the way that you're going to play the game at all, but I think you'll find it pretty mind-blowing anyway. This little detail was also uncovered by Lance McDonald, who revealed that Elden Ring always loads in a very low detail copy of the entire overworld at all times, no matter where you are. This is because the weather progression and timekeeping through the day-night cycle is handled by ensuring consistency across the entire map, so there must be some version of the overworld rendered at all times. Though none of the actual geometry of the game is rendered in, and this system uses as little RAM as possible, it's still more than you might expect. Number 2. Getting custody of the dog. One of the bosses you have to fight in Raya Lucaria Academy is called the Red Wolf of Radagon. Now this is interesting because Radagon is the ex-husband of Renala, the master of Raya Lucaria. If all those R names are getting confusing already, then I apologize for this next bit. Basically, before the shattering of the Elden Ring, Radagon was a warrior of the Golden Order who fell in love with the woman he was supposed to be fighting, the Full Moon Queen Renala. They had 3 kids called Rani, Rykard, and Radahn. Yes, that Radahn, the one with the little horse. Radagon abandoned her after the shattering of the Elden Ring, however, and things went sideways. Awful as that may be, the fact that his dog appears as a boss in her castle suggests they must have got a dog while they were together and she kept it. It's a tiny pointless detail and one you might not even notice since there's a good chance you don't know who Radagon is when you meet his dog, but it's pretty darn cool all the same. Number 1. You can take a bath. Okay, look, this entry is as close as we're getting to an actual tip, so it might seem a little less pointless, but we are talking about soaping yourself down in a grand gothic fantasy RPG, so I'm gonna allow it. You might already know that if you go rolling around in poison, you'll get coated in the stuff, which is usually not good news for your health bar. Poison is a huge pain in Elden Ring, so knowing how to deal with it quickly before it takes you out is very important. And it turns out the answer lies in one of the most mundane items in your inventory, a bar of soap. Elden Ring may offer up a world of fantasy adventures, horrifying creatures, and gorgeous yet threatening biomes, but even here, taking a bath is never a bad thing. Using the soap dually gets you all cleaned up and dramatically reduces and reverses your poison buildup. Unless you run out of soap, in which you may want to take advantage of one other silly detail in the game, and that's standing on breakable objects to give yourself a breather. That gives you a window to wind that poison meter back down so you can live another day. Or another minute. This is Elden Ring after all. That's the end of our list, but do let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other pointless details in Elden Ring that blew your mind. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.